This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
This is a special episode of Dune Talk where we're going to be getting into everything that came out of the Venice Film Festival. So there's been a lot of reviews, a lot more interviews, news. We also have the soundtrack from Hans Zimmer. It's been an exciting week. And yes, people have seen the Dune movie, where one day after the premiere, there's been reactions all over the internet. So it's a really exciting time to be a Dune fan. So this is Marcus Gabriel, your editor at Dune Newsnet, and I'm here today with Garin.
Hey, it's Garin with Dune Companion. Just my blood pressure's at a normal rate right now, and I'm just really excited to talk about this. So
this is Johnny, and I am still coming down from the whole last 24, 36 hours, 48 hours where it was a lot of build up and then the floodgates open. So I'm really excited to get in and talk to you guys about it and hear your thoughts and share our thoughts with everyone else.
Hey, Simon here. A little bit caffeinated because it's early in the morning. Really excited to talk about this. It's officially here.
Today we have a special returning guest, Mark from DuneInfo.
And, I guess I'm the fortunate one because I was in the correct time zone for all the Venice news.
Yeah, you got a head start on all the reading. So, and Mark, I know that we've had the release of the David Lynch 1984, the 4K reedition.
Yep. And
you already received that.
Yep. So it comes in multiple editions. This is the limited edition, the Deluxe edition steelbook, which comes with a very nice design of Dune book, which has got lots of pictures by Ron Miller and Tony Masters in there about the pre-production art. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to contribute to that. So I've got a nice associate producer credit at the start. So I'm very happy to have this finally in my hands.
Yeah, congratulations.
So is Mark officially Dune canon now?
Yes, whatever I say goes. So.
Okay, so let's jump straight into the movie news.
Dune movie news.
Yesterday we had the world premiere of Dune at the Venice Film Festival. So we saw, of course, the press conference, as well as the red carpet with all the cast and crew. And then once the actual screening started, we had the embargo was lifted, and we had a flood of reviews and reactions posted online. So there's really a lot out there, whether it's the professional reviews from all the major media outlets, and we've had waves of reviews from the viewers who have seen the past day at Venice, or some people who have seen the movie earlier, like a couple months ago for reviews, but are now finally allowed to talk about that. So the first thing that I wanted to address, so there have been people summarizing these reviews. So let's see if we have a consensus among us. Are these largely positive, overwhelmingly positive, or are these mixed reviews? So let me start with you, Mark.
I'd say they were pretty much positive reviews. There are a couple of negative Nancy's and naysayers in there, as we were discussing earlier before we started recording. But I'd say they are overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, Johnny, I want to hear your thoughts as well. Specifically, there were some headlines talking about that Dune opens to mixed reviews.
I mean, this isn't really a matter of opinion at this point. There's metrics and data that you can use to get an answer to this question. Rotten Tomatoes, as a review aggregator, does take all the reviews published and available to read and access, and they take them all together, and the Rotten Tomatoes score that everyone gets is a percentage of what the reviews are as good versus bad, and it's very much that binary kind of down the middle, which isn't the most accurate and nuanced way of looking at film reviews. And generally I don't like Rotten Tomatoes because it does kind of mislead people in a lot of ways. But if we're talking about positive versus negative, right now there's 34 reviews in so far, which is about, roughly the last 24 hours since the reviews have come out. And 85% of them are positive. There's 29 positive, 5 negative. Average rating is at 8.2 out of 10, which is right on par with Villeneuve's other films, which have all been really well received. So yeah, I mean, the headlines you referred to are misleading. Again, as that is really the only way you can really describe it, because they are not split reviews. They're not mixed reviews, because when you're thinking about the word split and mixed, that suggests down the middle. That suggests, that there is a very much even number of people disagreeing over, their thoughts on the movie. And that's really not the case. And I think if you went and looked at the actual headlines and the reviews and ratings and scores of all the individual reviews and outlets that went ahead and had things to say yesterday, I think that's pretty easily reflected. And I think if just scroll down Twitter's timeline and you can kind of get the general gist without even needing to kind of compile the numbers. You can just feel the energy, I would say.
Touch on that point you mentioned about Rotten Tomatoes, because obviously, yeah, it's great because they aggregate the reviews. You have like a clear percentage, which gives you an indication of how the reviews are trending. But even then, there's some misleading things. So I wanted to point out one review that I was looking at earlier, which was from the Independent UK by Clarice Lowry, and it was a glowing review. So let me just read the headline. Dune review: spectacular sci-fi adaptation is this generation's Lord of the Rings trilogy. And going into one of the quotes from that review, it is a film of such literal and emotional largeness that it overwhelms the senses. If all goes well, it should reinvigorate the book's legacy in the same way Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy did for J.R.R. Tolkien's work. So this is a glowing review. I mean, this is really excited to see this. And this isn't the only review that made the comparison. We've been hearing this for already people involved with the production for a while, and also now we're seeing this in multiple of the professional reviews, as well as some of the early reactions as well. So yeah, really excited to see this. Now, if you go to Rotten Tomatoes, what did they? Of course, they mentioned that the review is fresh, so it's a positive review. But look at their quote: "The casting choice is poor. It's a small but noticeable chip in the paint when it comes to Dune, a work that's otherwise of such intimidating grandeur that it's hard to believe it even exists in the first place." So that really stood out to me, because if you read that whole review, it's basically, the whole thing is a glowing review, and then all the way at the bottom she makes a sort of like almost a footnote about like her view on the casting choices, which we can maybe get into after. But then that's the first thing that's mentioned in Rotten Tomatoes summary. So I think that's like a word of advice to everybody. Like, okay, look at those overall numbers, because they do give you an indication of where, what the feel is in this case of the press. But when you look at the reviews, definitely read through some of the reviews in full, because you're not always getting that full summary. So let's go over to you, Garin. What was your what's your impression about the overall sense of these reviews?
Yeah, so really excited that overall I'm just reading, and that's a great point, Marcus. You got to read between the lines. You've got to read into that article and really dissect it, because what the headline may give you isn't the whole story. And so I think that's a great point you made there. I really am super excited. One of the first reviews I saw was a negative one. I think it was David Ehrlich, which was massive disappointment. And when I saw that, thankfully I had already been prepped by you, Johnny, to know how to navigate a lot of these reviews. And so I was able to take that and just form it into all the other reviews that I read yesterday. And when you do that, you can stay neutral, you can stay balanced. And honestly, I am just beyond thrilled, because I'm seeing and I'm hearing the things that I was hoping to see. in a lot of these reviews. In fact, a case in point, like you mentioned, Marcus, is the Hollywood Reporter. So this is Venice Dune frenzy erupts on social media following first press screenings. So, this is kind of a summary of a little bit of what people experienced yesterday in Venice. But you have to make sure you read all the way to the end, because in this review, it starts all positive regarding the direction, the acting, but then you also see near the end some things about, but it was maybe too much. It was perhaps overdone. There was, I'm just paraphrasing here, and I think you have to weigh that all in and just make sure that you're taking in their whole experience. And obviously, as a critic, you're going to want to share not only the positive, but the things that maybe didn't feel good to you. And I respect that. That's part of what the process is. But Marcus, overall, I'm just beyond excited, because really things were mentioned relating to great storytelling, a lot of really positive comments that I was hoping I would read, and it's coming out in the first round of reviews. So,
yes, Simon, what's your overall feel on the tone of the reviews?
Like we were saying before, there's always going to be some negative Nancy ones. Rotten Tomato, I love you and I hate you, because you're very clickbait like to get people's attention. Like, of course, if you see a bad headline, you're going to click on that one more. But overall, I think the reviews have been positive. I've seen a couple where it's like, well, the story was kind of slow. I don't know, maybe the person was not familiar with the source material. Let's face it, Dune is kind of slow at some point. Did they think this was going to be an action-packed movie all 2.5 hours? No. I do love the one that you mentioned about Lord of the Rings. And it made me go, whoa, Lord of the Rings is 20 years old. There is a whole generation that grew up on that as their Star Wars, as their big motion picture. And now we'll have a new generation growing up with Dune, and hopefully a part 2, But I think that's going to be announced later this week.
Let's hope for that. And yeah, going back to Johnny's point, like looking at these the headlines about the mixed reviews, like it's really easy to debunk that with actual data. So I think at the end of the day, like look at the whole picture. Like there's like the majority of reviews on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics are overwhelmingly positive. There are definitely some which we'll get into from some major media outlets which are quite critical. So I think that will be an interesting point to discuss about as well. But then if you go to social media and you look at the reactions from people who saw the screening, there were people who were fans of the book for decades. There are people who have just got into Dune like a couple of years ago. But like everybody was talking about like how it was an epic experience, and like that they were so excited that they wanted to go watch it again. I was even talking to someone who was going to see it for the second time at the Venice Film Festival. So you can see that there's a lot of excitement, and these showings were like sold out really quickly. I mean, it was really hard to get these tickets, and I think you had mentioned that Johnny, about like how you were talking to someone and they were saying that the early showings in Germany were already selling out.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the only person that I had talked to. I mean, there have been people, because now the places where it's going to be opening in a couple of weeks, or less than 2 weeks now, it'll be opening weekend in these places in 2 weeks. A lot of European countries, Western European especially, and the people I talked to, Norway, Netherlands, Germany, a lot of them had said that their local theaters, they themselves had already went ahead and got tickets, for opening weekend, and they said that there are already some showings that had been sold out. So, I mean, that's always a good sign. I mean, that's of course very anecdotal, like evidence of anything, but I mean, of course, you'd rather hear that than, oh yeah, I'm like the only one that's going to be there, like that they're not really having any sort of attention drawn to them, which is good. And of course, this is right after tickets have come out on sale, because they come out about 2 weeks in advance. So still 2 weeks, of course, where people are going to be buying them. And then on the weekend itself, of course, most people probably just walk up and buy them. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's going to be really, now that Venice and the world premiere has happened, of course, we have Toronto to International Film Festival, which is where Dune is going next on its little world tour, which is going to be fun. We'll get more reactions there. We'll get more reviews from outlets and critics that weren't able to attend Venice, which will give us, more data, more numbers, more quotes and things that we can kind of take into account. But really, I think in a couple of weeks, that's going to be like the biggest next benchmark is opening weekend. What are people going to be saying about it? Like fans, general, audience, how are the numbers going to look? That's something that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on, and will be, some sort of metric again for success and what we can, see going forward potentially, especially in the US release, which is again, October 22nd.
On that review that we were mentioning about the IndieWire review. So Johnny, have you actually read through that review?
Absolutely not. Because I already know. I mean, I literally talked about this, as Mark pointed out on Twitter. I just talked about this on the last episode because I was prefacing the premiere with the fact that reviews are, one person's opinion. You have to take them, read between the lines, dig into them a little bit, but also take them at a certain value. And David Ehrlich is a very well-known critic. Whether you could call him famous or infamous is probably like, up to your own interpretation. There are films that I totally agree with him on 100%. But I'd say the majority of the time, at least for me, he kind of, he has a very particular taste, just like anyone else would. But the reason why I haven't lended any credence to him, and he has gotten a lot of, pushback in certain respects. I know that he was kind of getting ratioed on Twitter with replies and quote tweets and things like that, just kind of with people throwing in their 2 cents. And then on Letterboxd, where he usually posts his reviews, the replies were deactivated on his review. So, people are going to have their thoughts on him and his review. I did see some excerpts from his review, to be fair, and I did read them. And I saw them because people had quote tweeted them or had taken them and posted them somewhere else. And they said, wow, like his review just makes me like more excited for the movie, because what he's describing as why he didn't like it is why I'm excited, or why I would be looking forward to it. There was one quote in particular, I think it said something along the lines of, if you liked Blade Runner 2049 but wanted more aerial shots or sequences of flying over vistas and things like that, then this is going to be right up your alley. And he like made it like a negative, and I'm like, yeah, those are some of my favorite parts of Blade Runner. I love those like moments and those visuals. So I can't really, it's very strange. I don't know. I the reason I don't read it, like, I'm not trying to discount his opinion by any means, but I just know, like, we're totally in disagreement. Like, I'm not going to align with it. And the thing that I did read and the other parts that I read, again, were reasons why I would be excited about the movie. I don't really take them as negative. So, everyone has to form their own opinion, but yeah, I'm not gonna read too much into that. And there were other, to be fair, not just to him, but there were other outlets and other critics who did have negative to mixed reviews. I know Variety was one of those. The Hollywood Reporter, one of their chief film critics, was very, mixed on it, to say the least. So he's not the only one, but again, he's in the minority by far. He's in the 15, 20% potentially that did not like it. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to focus on that or hyper focus on any one particular review.
Mark, going to you, like, was there any specific reviews that stood out to you especially?
Johnny tweeted one out from the icsfilm.org, which I thought was just a very well written interview. A lot of the interviews are just almost telling you the story, like the Cliff Notes version of Arrakis and Caladan and stuff. but the ICS one I thought had some very nice insights into the actual storytelling. But some of my other favourite ones was there was a Glenn Kenny one on Roger Ebert site, and the quote that stood out, he gave it 3.5 out of 5 on that, and the quote that stood out to me from that was, "To say that I have not admired Villeneuve's prior films is something of an understatement." So how he cannot like any of Denis Villeneuve's previous films, I do not know at all. I know everyone's got the favourites, but I don't know of anyone who hates all of them.
Yeah, that is really interesting. The Glenn Kenny one in particular, I thought was interesting because he there's another critic that I think writes for RogerEbert.com, and he tweeted out the review, like a link to it, and said that he was really like heartened by his reaction because he kind of really trusts Glenn. And these are guys who are very much like, I mean, they're experts like in film. These people writing for Roger Ebert are very much versed like in cinema and have studied film, probably went to school for film. So that's a very kind of distinct niche of the film critic, community versus something like IGN or Games Radar, which are much more, basic entertainment like reviews and thoughts.
There was one tweet as well by Jeff Vandermeer, which kind of sums up a lot of the things we've been discussing, which is from the Dune movie advanced reviews, I gather the movie is too long, too short, and just right. The story is too slow, too fast, and perfectly paced. The filmmaking traditions are traditional, but avant-garde, and also of the moment. And that I will enjoy it, except when I don't.
One other thing I was going to mention too, Mark, was that with the Roger Ebert reviews in particular, like Glenn Kenny, they actually do their star system is out of 4. So 3.5 out of 4. That's really, that's really quite good. Like that's like an 85 out of 100, 87 out of 100 or something like that, if you were to calculate it. So that's really very much on the higher end, which again is good. I noticed even looking at something like Metacritic, there are several perfect scores, or like 100s, 10 out of 10 scores that I've seen so far, which is interesting. And that's from a number of places: Total Film, the Telegraph, Empire, The Guardian. So a variety of different outlets and critics.
Yeah, GameSpot, Games Radar, Telegraph, Independent, The Guardian, all gave it 100%, which is 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, whatever their scoring systems are. So yeah, there's a lot of good grades out for it. And I think a lot of the reviews have also been saying stuff that we all came away from the IMAX preview knowing that, this is a film that needs to be seen in the cinema. It's huge, it's fast, it's almost like a biblical epic and Hans Zimmer score. And I think it's kind of odd that one of Villeneuve's next films is going to be Cleopatra, because that's one of the old style Hollywood blockbusters, one of those vast epic cinematic experiences. So from Dune to Cleopatra, Villeneuve is definitely one of the top filmmakers, I think, in that sort of old Hollywood tradition.
Yeah, and going to that quote you were mentioning, Mark, from Jeff Vandermeer, I think that perfectly represents it, because the critics' reviews, they obviously have a key role here, but these are at the end of the day different opinions, and almost everywhere I've seen people praising Hans Zimmer's score for IndieWire, David Ehrlich that Johnny was talking about. He basically almost slammed the score. So, so at the end of the day, these are opinions. Some people are going to have strong opinions either one way or another. The thing to keep in mind with the critics' reviews is we're talking 30, 40 reviews at the moment, and it is a small sample size, right? And keep in mind that eventually these are going to open also to the audience scores, and that's going to open to a much larger sample size, and that's also a very important data point that we don't have yet.
From a mathematical background, I can tell you it's such a small sample size that 1 or 2 negative reviews and it throws the percentage way down. So hopefully once we get some higher numbers, volume of numbers, we'll see a more accurate and representative score. But hopefully it's going to push it up.
But one comment I have, going back to the whole social media thing, is I know my Twitter feed is very Dune centric, but I feel like it was getting a lot more attention than the Shang-Chi movie that just came out from Marvel. I feel like some people were tweeting about that in general, but I feel like Dune was very much trending on Twitter more than Shang-Chi was, and that's a good sign.
No, I mean that's an interesting point. I mean, I even tweeted about that. I said, this was after, like, kind of in the wake of the premiere, the red carpet, and the reviews, flooding in. And I don't know where it peaked at, if this was probably the peak, but it had like 60,000 tweets and over 60,000 tweets, and it was at like right around number 5, like trending in the US as far as like what people were talking about. And yeah, that's pretty impressive, because keep in mind, the vast majority of the people who are tweeting about it have not even seen the movie. they're just talking about it, talking about what people have said and the reviews, and their kind of their own excitement about it, which is always heartening, I think. And this is still in the US where it's trending, and this movie is a month and a half away. So I think once they're really going to build on this in the premiere, and I said this in the Discord like last night before I went to bed, I was like, I'm really looking forward to, and I can't wait for all the TV spots and the online advertisements and the other things that they're going to use in the coming weeks. Like, for example, getting into football season here in the US, which is huge. There's going to be a lot of TV spots I can already see where they're going to be highlighting the big action sequences and the kind of spectacle for the general, like, people who are going to be watching, and kind of drawing them in. But using the reviews from this and using the reviews from TIFF and in general, the high ratings, those, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, and using those pull quotes and things like in the actual advertisements, and using that to kind of, drive excitement, I think that's always a key for any film. But I think for this one in particular, where you're really trying to show that it's accessible and that people can watch it and enjoy it without knowing anything else, I think that's, especially important.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned football. So I'm not a big American football fan, but I'm more of a soccer fan. But I wonder if, like other big movies, maybe on a Monday night, do they even do Monday Night Football anymore? I feel like it's Sunday Night Football, right?
Yeah, they do.
Okay. Sometimes I feel like they do stuff for Monday Night Football, showing like an exclusive first clip. So maybe they will do something like that. Maybe they will show an exclusive first clip to get people's attention. Like, I remember when the Star Wars sequels were coming out, a couple of trailers hit during Monday Night Football. So maybe we'll get even I don't want to say another trailer, but maybe an exclusive clip from it. So it's good press in general. Like you said, we'll start getting more marketing stuff. We'll get more teaser spots. And the World Series will start soon also in baseball. So baseball playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a good point, Simon. I think, and what we've been saying for a little while now, especially the last couple of weeks, because things have been ramping up so much, is that the marketing has been really spot on, and they've been kind of going, I think, the extra mile in a lot of places to make smart decisions and kind of get a wide a blanket out there. And I think we're going to see even more of that from now on.
Yep. I'm wondering if we're going to see the first 10 minutes posted on YouTube, which is, they've done that before for other movies, and they seem to have resurrected it recently. So the 10 minutes we saw at the IMAX, it seems like that would be a perfect thing for them to put on YouTube. When they do that, I've no idea, because there's 5 weeks difference between France to America in terms of release dates.
Yeah, I think, that's a good point as well, Mark. That is something that has been resurrected lately, especially during the pandemic, I think, just to give people a little extra taste of it, and I think that would be certainly a viable option. I think that people would really like to see that. Whether or not they do it remains to be seen. I think if they were, it'd probably be closer to the US release for sure, probably. Maybe it's something they would do, like, when tickets are going on sale or something, to kind of drive people that direction. But yeah, they have a lot of options for sure.
And talking of marketing, I don't know if you've seen the Dune-avatar.com website, which came out maybe today. I'm not sure when it was released, but you do it on your phone. And you can create your own avatar in a still suit or Atreides armor.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm doing after this.
Yeah, they're definitely going all out on all the touch points. I think we're probably going to be surprised by what we get in the next couple of weeks as well. Garin, wanted to hear from you. Like, were there specific reviews or quotes that really stood out to you?
Yeah, and I'm not getting in a defensive position. I'm just acknowledging, you know, all the different opinions, like everyone's been talking about. But the Variety review by Owen Gleiberman, Dune review spectacular and engrossing until it isn't. And this is probably classified as one of the negative reviews, although again, as you read between the lines, he's making these points that this is fantastic world building on a scale that we haven't seen since, you know, Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. And so it's kind of a veiled compliment, but where he gets hung up is on why was this split into two films? Because as you're nearing the end of part one, he's saying, you know, there's just too many hanging chads. There's just too many unresolved plot points, but that's the very nature of having a part one and a part two. So even though you can read this as a criticism, I know, because of even an interview that happened, you know, just recently, and I saw this morning, Denis is trying to make the point that I didn't want to do this in one film. The whole point is to do it in two films so that we can have a complete experience and capture more of the source material. So you know, some of these reviews, while they at first seem so negative, and some of them are, really it's latching onto a point that is something that was a decision made very early on before the production of this film started. So, you know, I'm okay with the criticism about, I don't like this being split into part one and part two. I want to sit there for 2.5 hours and I want to have the whole story given to me. But that's what you can't do. If you know anything about this book, you realize that that's not the wisest way to go about telling the story. So again, to me, that's a criticism, but it works for me because I realize there's going to be people who don't understand the dynamic of the length of the story. And so they just want something that's just compact and a typical, you know, length of a film that they're used to seeing. But this is different. And that's what I love about this film. This film is different, and we're experiencing that. We're seeing it in the reviews, and different is good. And that's what we want to see happen. So yeah, so that was some thoughts I had about the Variety review.
Great point there, because you know, there's this sense I've seen that, like, even in other media forms, that like some people like have that like really strong reaction. Like, for example, even if they finish a book and then they realize, you know, it's the first part of the next book, and at the end of the day, I like that's sometimes difficult to understand. I mean, if it's a good story, at the end of the day, you want more of it. But yeah, I think Garin, like you're saying, like the overall message from that review is positive, but it seems that yeah, they're getting hung up on that one point, which is it's by the design, right? Like they say right at the beginning of the movie that this is Dune part one. And like, if they had tried to make this one movie, I can tell you for sure, like, and we, you know, we've seen the evidence, it would have been a disaster. So like this is intentional. The scope of this story is huge, and it has to be told over two films. There's just no other way around it. And I think to get hung up on like how the movie ends, and like, of course I respect the opinion, but you know, I think that doesn't do justice to everything that happens in this first movie. I mean, I haven't seen the whole movie yet. I've seen the footage from the IMAX preview, but there's so much great stuff in there. So just to like, you know, like leave on the point that, oh, it ended and it's not the full story, I don't think that's a strong argument.
Let me just read this at the end of this Owen Gleiberman article. He says, the giant sandworms who are protectors of the spice and burrow through the desert like a sinister underground tornado until they reveal themselves. They're like monstrous nostrils that suck in everything in front of them, are good for a moment or two of old-fashioned creature feature awe. But really, what do they have to do with anything? So that sentence right there makes me want to see this film, right? But the fact that he's saying, but what are these worms doing here? What does this have to do with anything? I don't want to come across as elitist, right? But that is the basis of the story, right? The worms have this incredible underlying part to play in this story. And the fact that he's like, what do these things have to do with anything? Well, that's going to be revealed. That's why you're going to stay in it, because you're interested in, obviously these things do have something to do with the story. They wouldn't be so monstrous and enormous in the plot. So anyway, I see from his point of view, it would be like, what is this? This is dumb. But to us, we know what that means. We know that it's pivotal to the telling of the story.
Well, you can tell someone never read the book, just or has been asleep. You know, the sleeper has definitely not been awakened in his life yet. The worms are a crucial character. Even watching clips of the '84 movie, everyone knows sandworms, Dune. It's even memes on the internet about Dune. Come on, my guy. Like, do some homework.
Yeah, in that same review as well, it talks about how the melange is a metaphor for oil and also a metaphor for drugs.
Yeah, you know
well,
what?
It is a drug. It's not even a metaphor for drugs. It is a drug.
It is a drug.
You know what? I found the metaphor when I was a little kid. I was maybe 9 or 10. I mean, like, this feels like it's in the Middle East. Oil? I don't know. Come on.
But going back to what Garin was saying about the two-partedness, I think it's Dune's strength, but also its weakness, because we all know, it can't be done as one film and give it justice. But that means you've got to cut it off somewhere, and that's going to leave people hanging. And you can say that's a good thing; it's a cliffhanger. But also, if some people feel it's unsatisfactory ending, then that could perhaps not have a negative impact on the film. But hopefully we get enough for a part 2, and then all those worries will be resolved and people can do it as a 5-hour marathon if that's what they want to do, and experience the whole story from start to finish. But if not, then at least the book sales will go up because people want to buy the book to see how the film ends.
Yeah. Going back to the Lord of the Rings, then let's not forget the Fellowship kind of ends with, so we spent 2.5 hours for them just to become a group of people that's going to go drop off a ring, and we never see the ring getting dropped off. So come on, it says part 1 in the beginning.
I have to say, like, pat myself on the back. Like, when I'm not always right, but when I'm right, I'm right. And I feel like in this instance, like, these reviews and reactions were definitely, like, I felt like were a vindication of how confident I was, like, in the movie. But there were definitely certain things I was nervous about to a degree, just because people had been expressing their own nervousness about it. Reviewers or critics or what have you. And so when other people are feeling that way, you're like, well, hopefully you don't feel that way when it actually comes time to watch it. And a few of those things that I just had in mind, and I think were really heavily addressed in the reviews and a lot of the reactions I saw, and I'm going to go through and read some of them. But one, how accessible can the movie be? Because that's a big question. I mean, just look at the David Lynch Dune. I think probably its biggest failure is that it just is so, like, dense. It feels like the novel, but even more like, convoluted because it's being translated into this other medium. And then also, we know it's going to be this big, epic, visually stunning, orally impressive, immersive, experience. But, what do people think of the characters? Like, do they care about the characters? Do they feel anything when they're watching it? Or are they getting kind of lost, like, in, like, the big, scale of it all? And then also, like, the pacing, just how the film feels, because we know it's over 2.5 hours long. A lot of times these days, I feel like critics and people complain a little bit more about length, just because the average runtime is getting so much longer, it seems like. So does it, in 2049, a lot of people were like, it not only is it a longer movie than Dune, but it's also, it definitely seems like it would be a slower movie by comparison, even though, I haven't seen, Dune yet. But a lot of these, I was very, very happy to see a lot of these did hit exactly on those things that I was talking about. So let's see, for example, Jack King, he said he was impressed by the balance it achieved between sweeping grandiosity and ample characterization, great performances. Rafael Montemayor said, everything I wanted and more, not super familiar with the books, but I found it to be compelling, fast pace, epic space opera with a surprising amount of pathos, career best performance by Timothée Chalamet and by Jason Momoa. Leonardo Goy, he said, did something frankly I did not expect. It made those 155 minutes fly by, embedding you in the world. Stephen Weintraub was talking about how it wasn't just a masterpiece of sci-fi, but of cinema in general. Did all the things that you would want to get out of a movie. We were talking about also Lindsay Barr. She said, I went in knowing nothing and was completely hypnotized by the world. It felt thrilling, but it was also emotionally authentic. And so in a lot of these, you are seeing, they're talking about, okay, yeah, it's as big and as epic and as detailed as something like Lord of the Rings. Okay, we kind of knew that, like we were anticipating that. But for someone that doesn't know anything about these movies, do you feel like people could enjoy it without knowing anything else? Rafael Montemayor, he also tweeted, it feels like the pop culture event we've been waiting for. It feels like the next Star Wars or next Lord of the Rings or next Game of Thrones. It's here, and not only is it epic, he said it's also just giddy fun. Don't let anyone tell you this is Star Wars for adults. Anyone can enjoy this story. So I think that speaks a lot to, this was something that we had talked about and the fans had talked about for a long time, whether it was on Reddit or what have you. But is it going to be rated R? Are they going to go really dark with it? Blade Runner 2049 was a big budget rated R film. And I was always pretty much of the stance, having read the book and having a feel for it, that it didn't need to be rated R by any stretch, and knowing that you really can get away with a lot of stuff these days with a PG-13 rating. So that was something I was glad to hear. I was not really expecting to hear, is that this can be accessible even to, younger teenagers and kids if they go together, like as a family or something. It's a coming of age story at its heart. And I think everyone who's, us reading the books know that as well. Especially depending on when we read it the first time. So yeah, I was really, really happy. Even Polygon did I believe an article saying that the thing that they were most impressed about with this movie was how they said the biggest surprise of 2021's Dune, Denis Villeneuve makes Frank Herbert's deeply dense space opera accessible. Our spoiler-free first look at how the film serves fans and newcomers at the same time. So yeah, overall, super happy. I mean, people saying that Timothée Chalamet's best performance, it's Oscar Isaac's best performance, Rebecca Ferguson. They cried during the movie, and even though they went in knowing nothing about it. I mean, that speaks a lot, I think, to just what Villeneuve and the cast and crew have done, making this such a big, like, epic thing, but also the little details and scene to scene, moment to moment stuff where, getting you invested in the characters and in the story. That's the most important thing. Look at Lord of the Rings. People love those movies because they are big and epic, and they look amazing. They sound amazing, but they also really love the characters. They love Frodo. They love Sam. They love, the scenes with Boromir and Aragorn, and that's why they go back to those movies so often, is because they love, spending time with those characters and like kind of going on that journey with them. So I think if you can do that with this first movie as a part one, especially, get people itching and wanting that part two, which again, a lot of these people said when the movie ended, I was ready to see more. Like I'm dying to see a part two, and it would be a travesty if it doesn't happen. I think that to me, overall, my overall feelings on everything we have seen and read so far was the most heartening and impressive thing, I think, because it just was, I was expecting everything else. Those aspects were what I was kind of hoping to see the most. And I think we've gotten that in spades, quite honestly.
Yeah, and I love that point about the accessibility of the movie, because we of course seen some glowing reviews about how if you're a Dune fan, you're gonna love this. Like, for example, Empire magazine, they gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and one of the quotes, and for science fiction devotees, especially those who have long worshipped Frank Herbert's dense tome and waited decades for it to be brought on screen in a more successful incarnation than the previous filmmakers have managed, make no mistake, Villeneuve's Dune is the adaptation you've always dreamed of. So that's great to hear as someone who's been a Dune fan for decades. But then to your point about Johnny, about some of these people, like I saw tons of reactions on Twitter about people who were going into this, I guess you could say, blind, not having known about the source material. They've maybe like seen the trailer, been excited about, you know, what was shown on this, but they were blown away, and it didn't seem like they were having any issues with understanding, you know, what the movie was about. Because I guess at the end of the day, like part one, I guess it's great because it's taking its time to introduce those characters. Like there's going to be more complexity potentially coming in part two, but for example, what we saw in the IMAX, that the breakfast scene with Paul and Jessica, you know, those moments which give people time to connect with those characters. It seemed that we're going to get a good amount of those and allow people to connect with these characters, and leave them wanting to see more of them.
Oh, just real quick, I was going to mention, because more people are seeing the film today, there are several screenings going on at Venice right now. We're getting, of course, more reviews, but also I think it's important because you're going into the first day and with the world premiere and everything, you might have heard some things as someone going into the screening, but you haven't been to the screening yet. And there's a lot of people that are about to watch it. Last night it comes out, there's all these glowing reviews, reactions. So now as someone that's seeing it today, I feel like maybe you're really kind of like, wow, my expectations are really high now. I feel like there's a chance of being underwhelmed because you're expecting so much based on what they've heard. Cody Derricks, who is a critic who is at the festival right now, he saw it today, and he tweeted earlier, I thought was interesting. He said, as a non-fan of the book, Dune blew me away. It's heavy duty, unyielding sci-fi, and proud of it. But unlike some other similar films, the narrative stays incredibly focused and clear. So he loved it. And again, he emphasized that I'm not someone who's read the book, not a fan of it in any way. And it still like blew me away. And I still think it's incredibly focused on the narrative and the story. And you're not going to get lost in that if you're not, a fan of the book. Go ahead, Garin.
You guys, I was a young teenager when I saw Lynch's Dune, and don't get me wrong, I just still love that movie. But so many people, I've mentioned this before on this podcast, but so many people walked out of that theater and the word they said is, I'm just confused. I didn't understand what was going on. And so you had to have read the book. I wrote an article about that. To really appreciate Lynch's Dune, you have to read the book. I'm really excited that I'm not seeing the word confused in any of these reviews. I'm not seeing people who are not familiar with the book, not familiar with the story. I'm not hearing that they're walking out and saying, this was dazzlingly beautiful, but I had no idea what was going on. So to me, it kind of points to what Javier Bardem said about how it feels like this was an indie film with an enormous budget, which I think is something Timothy mentioned in that interview this morning. But that's a great sign to me, because that means the intimacy, the interaction of the characters, that's coming through. Because so often in these big budget action films and even sci-fi films, it can get lost, that the character interaction, the intimate level that we relate to as humans can be lost in all of that incredible CGI action. So I'm really excited that I'm not seeing the confusion statement that I remember as a teenager seeing with Lynch's Dune. I think that's a great sign.
I don't know how anyone could be confused. They gave away those leaflets, didn't they, with the terminology of the Imperial. So you just need to read that in the cinema before you watch the film.
So I have to do homework before watching a movie.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I'll get right to that. No, but I think your point about people saying they're not confused is a plus, because a lot of people that I've shown the 84 movie to, you get the same thing. It was cool, but who was what and how did that take place? And I lost track after the water, and yeah. And going back to watching the Lynch movie, and like I love the Lynch movie. It's a guilty pleasure. Like it's my gateway drug to Dune, so I'm appreciative to it. It's my spice melange to the Dune world. But it is very, I can see for non-book readers where it could be very confused. And my thing I want out of this is people fall in love with characters. And I don't want just the Timothée Chalamet fanboys and fangirls to fall in love with him because they're going to get their heart broken if we get a part two. But I want them to come out of there and be like, whoa, Lady Jessica's my favorite character. Oh man, I wish I got more Duke Leto. You know, who is this Stilgard guy? Like, he's pretty cool. I hope we see more of him in part two. Like, I want people to fall in love with the characters, because I think that's what makes great storytelling. You know, it's great to have a full story, but when you attach to certain characters, and that's something I feel like the Star Wars sequels failed on, you didn't really get time to attach to any of your main new character. Like, as much as I love Poe Dameron, we didn't get to see him that much. You know, it's getting those connections with those characters. And I hope that's something that we start seeing people being like, oh, wow, I really like Piter. He's really weird. I should ask him to join my goth band. You know?
Marcus, I'm sorry, we're going to have the longest podcast episode ever here, but I just wanted to mention something that Eric Davis tweeted. I think he writes for Rotten Tomatoes. And he said, if WB doesn't let this entire crew make Dune Part 2, it will be a great mistake. There won't be a single person who walks out of Dune without thinking about what comes next. This is a film that needs its counterpart to feel complete. Maybe that's a negative, but it's the truth. I've read a little bit about maybe and intimated what some of these last scenes of Part 1 might be, because I know the story. And to me, that kind of goes along with the way movies and TV series have changed over the last couple of decades. It's like the Marvel universe. We're used to installments and episodic big budget film series. So to have people virtually on the edge of their seat at the end of Part 1, to me that's a plus, because we're used to that. We experience that with a lot of the movie franchises that we all love today. So, and again, we want this to be a franchise, right? We want more of these cliffhangers. We want Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. We want this to happen. So to me, this harkens to a really positive response by some of the reviewers.
Yeah. There was a review in Den of Geek by David Crow, and he says, Dune is an astonishing swing of ambition and passion from filmmakers at the top of their craft, and it more often than not connects like a thunderbolt. As a project that is only meant to start a new cinematic cycle, it left me eager to follow this Paul Villeneuve towards the next strange corner of Arrakis, which I think is summing up what you're saying. Yeah, people love the film and they're eager to see a part 2 and part 3 and more.
The fact that this is 2 parts, this is great news to me. Like anywhere you cut it, I don't see it can be a negative. Like if you're expecting to like come in and from the perspective of like solely being a movie fan and you want to get a complete story on the screen in 2 hours, I can understand that argument. But from all other views, this is meant to start an epic story that's going to be enjoyed by people of all the different generations. This is just the beginning. Like as we had that important line from Chani in the last episode, which is a really key line. So yeah, this is just exciting to see that people are like coming out of these reviews wanting to see more, and there is going to be more. There's going to be Dune Part 2. There's going to be like the Dune the Sisterhood series. There are more books, comics, games coming out. So this is really the start of something bigger. And I understand like the perspective of wanting to like review just looking at the movie itself, but I think when it comes to this series, this saga, you have to look wider in order to give that complete perspective.
If I can make a point in referencing Star Wars again, because I do that a lot, I realize. Without spoiling, well, I guess it's been about 6-7 months now. If you look at the season 2 of The Mandalorian and how it ends, that is a cliffhanger, and now people are craving more. So I think that's what I'm hoping that people will get, that they want to know what happens. Sure, I would love for book sales to go up, but as someone that worked in the comic industry, I know Marvel movies do millions of dollars, but do books go up? No. But the goal is to have people be interested, still have word of mouth as he's making Cleopatra. I'm predicting Zendaya as Cleopatra. Just putting that out there. You never know. Directors like working with the same actors and actresses, but the goal is
Simon. I'm going to blame you now if my expectations are for Zendaya and it doesn't happen.
all right. I'll go back and I'll George Lucas this and I'll edit this part out when the cast is announced. But I think the goal is to get people's attention still interested in Dune long after it's out theatrically, long after it's out, on video or home demand or whatever it's called nowadays. But the goal is people still interested and they come back to it and be like, oh, I remember Dune. I really liked the first one. I can't wait for part two.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Johnny, like thinking about the genre of science fiction and potentially fantasy in general. When it comes to critics' reviews, should we be looking at those differently? Because I mean, like if you look at as an overall the breadth of science fiction movies, there are some like really great ones there. But if you compare to other genres, there is a lot less of science fiction and fantasy in general out there.
Yeah. So you mean as in like how the mainstream feels about like the genre, I guess?
Yeah, from the critic's perspective, because like if you look at, for example, action films, the genre is much deeper, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, science fiction in general is a niche genre. It's not, and it's funny to say because Star Wars is one of the most popular things ever. But that's a very specific, I mean, it's, you can make the argument it's not technically science fiction, which I would probably agree with. But I think people are a little bit more averse to the genre than they are going into even, some superhero movies could very easily be considered science fiction. And those, of course, still get rave reviews, especially the MCU, the Marvel ones, because that brand is just so strong and people love those characters in that studio, for better or worse. And I think that was, again, something I really took heart in a lot of the reactions and reviews that I have seen and read was that, these people admittedly are not like science fiction gurus or anyone who has any sort of aptitude specifically for the genre. They just want they want a good movie, or they want an entertaining blockbuster. They want something that's going to do something different. And I think those sentiments, I think, are pretty easily reflected in, fans or general audience as well. And I think that'll make for a good translation as far as what we're seeing and hearing, the positivity there, and how people that are actually going to go and see the movie are going to feel about it. I think even in the trailers so far that they've done a real good job as far as, not making it into, something that's just, talking about inaccessibility, making it into something that you just can't quite wrap your head or like put your hands on. I think that they're making it very relatable, and they're making it to something that the focus isn't necessarily on the most abstract and most, strange aspects of the world. Show them the character, the actors that they know, show them people that they like, that they want to see in the movie, show them, big VFX, show them spectacle, show them action, show them sword fights, all that stuff. Once you get them into the theater and they still get all of that, but they're going to get the weird, strange, it kind of mesmerizing and hypnotic elements of Dune and things that I think Villeneuve does a very good job of bringing into his films. Show that there. I think once you get the entire package, everything in context, it's going to be very difficult, I think, for most people walking out to be like, well, I didn't like that movie, or I was not entertained, or I was not at all, invested or immersed in that. I think people, the vast majority, general audience or critics or not, I think are going to walk out and think, but that was really like different. Like that was impressive. Like I would like to see more of that. I would watch a show kind of set in that world. I would watch it. I want part two. I would like to watch the rest of this with these characters in this world. Because while it is familiar to things that I'm familiar with and I am a fan of and that I have nostalgia for, whether it be Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, this is different enough. And Robbie Collins, who I think wrote for The Guardian, gave it 100 out of 100, perfect score. He said, or The Telegraph rather is what he writes for. He said something very telling, I think, toward the end of the paragraph talking about part two. He said, you know, a lot rides on this, you know, talking about the budget and talking about, you know, they're gonna want to see some sort of metric for success, and talking about, are people going to want to go see this? And he said, kind of like in a post Game of Thrones world, you know, maybe if this Dune movie had come out in 2010, we'd be having a lot tougher uphill climb. But we're 10 years on from that, more than 10 years. And in that interim, you know, Game of Thrones has been one of the biggest pop culture phenomenons ever, especially in the world of, you know, visual media. And I think, you know, that's a deep, complex world that no doubt has taken inspiration from Dune. And, you know, people loved that. They loved the different houses and focusing on what made those factions different. They loved, you know, getting into the intricacies of the mythology and the history and the lore and everything. So yeah, I think this is really a good time for it. And I think that sci-fi, Dune is sci-fi, no question. It's probably the greatest, you know, it's the greatest sci-fi novel ever written. But they're doing this in just the right way to make it not this wall, this barrier that's going to have, you know, a tough entry for some people. I think everything we're hearing and everything that I was expecting has kind of come to fruition, hopefully. And still have to see the movie for myself, of course. Still have to see what people think about it, fans, when they see it in some of the European countries, some of the Asian countries in the next couple of weeks. But I'm just really optimistic. And I think that aspect that you mentioned and kind of were asking about won't be a detriment.
The last point I wanted to touch on in relation to, I guess, the genre or the source material. So I think it is really important to see all these different opinions from people who have read the book, from people who haven't read the book, from people who have been fans for a long time, for people who are just learning about this because of the trailer. I think that there's a lot of merit to seeing all these different opinions and views. But having said it, when you look at the critics' reviews, like reviews that really want to go in depth and like analyze every aspect of the movie and like understand like the history and the context, I do think it is important for at least those really in-depth reviews that want to give a complete overview to have that knowledge. So I think, as mentioned, like all these reviews, they make valid points. Some of them they're more opinion based. Some of them they go into various aspects, whether it's the acting, the score, and talk about that. But I do feel like in order to get that complete, I guess the complete idea of what this movie means, I do think it's important to have that knowledge of the book and potentially the whole series, so that you can understand you know, where this is all going to. And then I think that there you can tell a complete narrative about how this movie succeeds or doesn't in adapting the book. Like one review that I was looking at from GameSpot mentioned that overall they said Denis Villeneuve's Dune is the best possible adaptation of the classic sci-fi novel. But it's interesting because they listed the positives and the negatives, and of course on Twitter, like everybody immediately latches on the negative. One of the things they mentioned, like the original story, it relies on the familiar white savior tropes. So I mean, without going into like all the details of what comes later in that book and later in the series, that's obviously not the case. So I think as a critic, if you're going to bring up that point, then I think it is important that you have that full context in order to go deep in those discussions.
On that GameSpot interview review, though, at the end they do say Villeneuve has said that he views Dune's larger story as a rebuttal of the white savior trope. This may not come across in this chapter, but I'm inclined to give the visionary director the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see where this tale goes. So at least they acknowledge the fact that, you know, the director doesn't see it as that type of story.
All I'm going to say to the person that wrote the GameSpot review is pick up the books.
Yep.
Pick up the books. Don't wait for part two. Be ahead. And you might want to go back and rethink what you wrote.
Yeah. Well, I had White Savior on my Dune bingo card, so I was happy to take that.
You did. I did see that.
be really clear here that this is not about being an elitist and saying that like, oh, you have to read the book in order to give a view, but it's really about when you're reviewing, like specifically this movie, that there's a lot more history. It's not like you're reviewing like a new like action blockbuster or a fully original story that was written for the screen. There is a whole history behind it. And sure, you can review just what's there on the screen, but there's so much more deeper than you can go, like when you're like going into the source material and understanding the history about it, knowing about what the author was intending, understanding like where these characters are heading, what are the messages, what does it mean to the society. So yeah, like I think if people go into Dune Part 1 and they enjoy like all this fantastic world building, they enjoy the setting, they enjoy the characters, and they come out of there after 2 hours 35 minutes and they've had a great enjoyable time, that's great, and then they can come back and watch Dune Part 2. But I think most of all, like Dune is something that has messages for society in the past and society today, and I really hope that people start to get into that, and then that comes more to play in Dune Part 2.
Hey Marcus, I want to just underscore what you just said right there. Again, back to Lord of the Rings. The success of Lord of the Rings is that everybody on your street liked Lord of the Rings, but only one person read the books, right? So I read the books as a teenager and I absolutely loved the movies, but my wife at the time, she had never read the books and would never read the books, and she loved those movies, right? So yeah, we don't want an elitist dynamic going on here. We want, the success of sci-fi films comes when people who may not necessarily like sci-fi really get attached and love a film like that. And to that point, Glenn Kenny in RogerEbert.com mentions, if you're not a Dune person, these listings, and he's referring to a lot of the allusions to other films and like Lawrence of Arabia and other things. If you're not a Dune person, these listings sound like gibberish. And if you will read the other reviews complaining about how hard to follow this, it's not. If you pay attention and the script does a good job with the exposition without making it seem like exposition. So again, David Lynch had a really hard time. He had to do that introduction with Princess Irulan, right, to give everybody kind of a sense of direction of this film. What I love about this review by Glenn Kenny is that we're just experiencing and we're absorbing the exposition as we're experiencing the film. It's not, as much as I'm, a fan of the original Blade Runner, we didn't want to have that voiceover, right? That's not always a good sign of good storytelling and filmmaking. So the fact that this review is telling us that we're going to experience the film, but at the same time, we're going to be understanding and learning about these houses, these cultures, the political, religious dynamics of it. I think that's a great sign.
I think something that we saw in the preview, the 10-minute preview at the IMAX, right away, we're introduced to the world and you understand what goes on. I don't want to say they dumb it down for the audience, but they kind of introduced us to the world without spending 20, 30 minutes of pointless, like, hey, this is what you need to know. No, it's right in your face, it's action-packed, and it feels really warm and sincere from Zendaya's voiceover. So I think, granted, I've seen as much as you guys seen, and I think it does a great job introducing us to the world of Dune and what is going on.
Yeah, I still want this Dune terminology to make a comeback. I think that should be included in the home video release.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, we've looked at all these different reviews, and I think it's justified to feel really excited. There's a lot of positivity here, enthusiasm. So I think that this really bodes well for the future of the movie and its upcoming theatrical releases. So let's actually jump into some other news coming out of the Venice Film Festival. So of course the whole cast was there, and they had several interviews. So I'll start with you, Mark, from the press conference, which you kindly uploaded all the different segments from. What was your main takeaway? Was there any of the questions that really stood out to you?
The one about the hairstyles, I thought that was very no. If anyone has seen that was a bit of a recurring joke in the press conference. I enjoyed the question about the sandwalk, which was a very short question and a nice answer by Timothée Chalamet, just about the choreography that went into that. It wasn't just them, just walk arrhythmically across the sand. They actually got a proper choreographer to develop that walk, which we kind of see in one of the TV spots or trailers, but it's kind of a sweeping motion, an arc with one of the legs when they're walking. So that was a nice, insightful one, I thought, about the making of it. But there was questions about the relationship between Leto and Jessica, which I thought was some nice interaction there from the cast, talking about how a lot of time that they spent together working out that relationship off camera before putting it on screen, and what they thought that relationship was, what true love was that enabled Jessica to betray the sisterhood in that way.
Garin, did you see those interviews?
I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but along the lines of the sandwalk, I like the interview where they talked about the sign language that they developed for the film. And again, I love the fact, in fact, again, back to David Lynch, I remember when Jessica and Paul are running across the sand in that film, and I'm like, I don't know if they're really, I kind of see some rhythm there. It didn't really feel authentic to me, But the fact that they're, Denis is looking at the very finest of details, like the sandwalk or like the hand language, sign language. I just think that's just an act of artistic love, right? And that comes across. Those of us that love films and we love filmmaking, we appreciate that kind of thing because it feels real. Feels like it's a real place.
I was going to mention real quick, I did not expect, Benjamin Millepied to come up in this, and that's the choreographer who came up with the walk, and that Natalie Portman's husband. They met making Black Swan, which he also choreographed. So the fact that they got like a world-class, dance choreographer to help them design, the walk, like it just is unreal. Like every new interview or every conference or whatever comes up, there's some now like new, like kind of shockingly intricate like bit of information that comes up. And it just really goes, I just cannot wait to see this movie. Like this is all around, from every element, from the sound to the effects and the cinematography and the production design and the way they just did everything. It really seems like, again, I have followed so many movies and have studied so many movies, and this is just, without a doubt, one of the most finely and intricately designed movies ever, I think. And you would want no less for Dune, I think. And I think the conference, the things that they talked about went into, and not only, I should highlight at the press conference, which I did watch in its entirety, they talked about that sand thing, which is kind of a funny little detail of design as far as like the dance choreography goes. But they also talked about Oscar Isaac. I thought gave some of the best answers, and Rebecca Ferguson gave some of the best answers at the conference. And what they were talking about was the characters and their kind of inner feelings, but also their relational feelings, and how Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto, for example, and then with Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, their relationship and how they decide to parent, and how they how their own kind of courtship is carried out, and what that is like, because it's not a marriage, of course, but how much do they lead on and let on as far as what the plan is and certain things in that nature. And so just to know, and that's something I really love, is that they highlight and they focus so much on all the technical aspects, but the stuff that you hear them talking about for the acting and for the actual character work that they had to do on set, Oscar Isaac mentioned that anytime a question came up or anytime that they really had to think about, well, what should we do in this scenario? They had the book on set. Like Denis would just pull out the book and be like, okay, this can inform this aspect of it, and we can pull from that. I think that just goes to show the very even keel, perfectly pitch perfect approach that they took with this in every single aspect. I think that was very impressive. And I thought the press conference, it was fun overall. They're talking about the hair and trying to, the person that asked about the sand walk tried to get Timothée Chalamet to do it, and he was like, I'm not your monkey up here to dance. But I thought that was appropriate.
One thing I took away from the press conference, and I haven't seen all of it, I've seen only just clips here and there. First of all, come on, let's get the sand walk trending on TikTok, because Chalamet wants us to do that. It felt like the cast had a really good time and they understood. And Denis was the human Wikipedia for, if they needed anything on set. I pictured Denis' copy of Dune being highlighted with like a bunch of Post-its with a little bunch of cliff notes all over the place. Also, just a random thought, Timothée Chalamet speaks perfect French. As someone that grew up in France, and it is my native language, I was like, wow. I hope he does the voiceover for the French version, but I think they got another actor, which is weird. You would think he would dub his own self. But overall, I was at work mostly all day yesterday, so I didn't get to experience all of Dune Italy fandom and all that, so I missed a lot. It just seems like they had a good time, and it doesn't seem forced. Like, yes, we had a great time making this movie. Thank you, Warner Brothers. Please make a part 2 so I can get paid again. It seemed like they enjoyed themselves. It also seemed like a lot of the cast learned from Denis. They learned, if they had any questions, they would go see Denis.
Simon makes a great point, is the general sense of the feeling, not just that they have now answering these questions, but the feeling that they all claim and seem to have had on set and making the movie. Then, they talk about it was just like a really like positive, like familial atmosphere, and the relationships were like really strong. I mean, Timothée Chalamet at the press conference said that he, considers them, the cast his brothers and sisters now. And it just feels, because I know Blade Runner 2049, that was a film that I also followed like really closely. And
Johnny, do you like that movie? I'm not sure if you like Blade Runner 2049.
Sure enough. But the thing with that movie is that, and no doubt, I think Dune, Denis, he has said multiple times now that this is the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. Like it artistically, this is the most challenging project I could have ever imagined. But the things that I have heard and the things that I have seen regarding 2049, that production just seems like a very stressful, and not like, not like negative or like toxic in any way, but like very much like business and like getting it done, and like having a lot of pressure to live up to the hype and to take on like the legacy of the original, which everyone, has such high regard for. I think with that movie, Denis had never done a movie of that scale before. I think that probably added to that pressure and to that stress and that element of it. Here, he has that experience, and that certainly helps and probably makes his job a little bit more enjoyable. But also having that childhood, and teenage kind of foundation for Dune, I think, while it may have been incredibly difficult, I think that he just found so much more joy in this, and engaging with the actors and, having them kind of bring to life like his own, again, childhood like vision and ideas for it. I think that, everything I've heard seems like really positive, and not like anyone was like, oh God, like it was just the most stressful, like miserable, like it just, you don't get that like sense in any way, even if they did want to try and like paper over something. Zendaya also said at the press conference, I was only there for a few days, I didn't shoot a lot, but as soon as I got there, they just brought me in and it felt just really comfortable. And she had, a really positive experience with the cast and the crew and Denis himself. So I think that's just more incentive, I think, to want to do a part 2, of course.
The last thing that I wanted to bring up from that was some of the questions that both Javier Bardem and Denis Villeneuve answered about the ecological aspect of Dune and you know the messages that are there and how important it is to the situation that in our world today. And so I want to go back to my earlier point. I think first and foremost, like people will go into Dune Part 1 and it's going to be like a spectacle on the screen. It's going to take them to a different world. And yeah, hopefully that everybody will come out of there enjoying it and you know, looking forward to the new movie, and that enthusiasm will carry over. But touching to the point that Dune has a lot of important themes that speak to us today, just as much as it spoke to the people 60 years ago when the book was first published. So I hope that the next step, you know, after people have enjoyed the movie, that they do like look further into, you know, what is the message of this movie, that they do pick up the book. And there's so much wisdom there, and I hope that by this movie becoming hopefully an enormous success everywhere that releases, it will like bring more attention to all that important aspects that Frank Herbert originally wrote about, and now Denis Villeneuve is bringing that vision to the big screen.
Yeah,
You know,
real quick, I'll chime in on that just real quick. Sorry, Simon. You're talking about the book and people like embracing the book because of the movie. Hopefully, after they think about it, they want to go and investigate further. I think that's something we're already seeing quite a bit. I think just with regard to the book. You know, Brian Herbert has tweeted out several times in the last couple of weeks, you know, it's, you know, on this best-selling list right now, it's, you know, skyrocketing over here, like it's doing really well, audiobooks and things like that. If you go on Amazon, it's been on, you know, their most read list for like almost a year, like 30 weeks or something like that. And, you know, it's number 7 right now for the most read books on Amazon. It's number 10 for the most, you know, best-selling books on there. So again, not only are people buying it, you know, out of interest, but they're actually sitting down and reading it, which is important. And so that's really heartening. Again, people are embracing the book. They're that interested, not only in the movie, but also what Frank Herbert had to say.
you know, one thing I would love, there's so many, you know, philosophy and Batman philosophy and Star Wars. What about a philosophy and Dune book explaining the messages behind, you know, Dune? And I think we have someone on this show. Mark would be great to write that book. Oh, wait. Hold on. Mark has something.
He already has it on his bookshelf.
I can find it.
Yeah, there's so much to excavate out of this story.
No, I've got a science of Dune book, and I think someone's done a philosophy of Dune book, but I don't think I've got that one to hand.
Mark, you should write it.
So let's jump to our last story for today, which is the Dune Sketchbook, music from the soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. So on the same day that we had the world premiere of the Dune movie at Venice, this first of three albums from Hans Zimmer was released. So you can find it now on all the major music services, whether you use Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and the tracks are also on YouTube. So if you haven't had a chance, listen to that. So let me start with you, Garin. I'm sure you've already listened to that some amount of times. So what's your impression of this first album?
Yeah. So as you might be, you might have anticipated, I really have listened to it pretty much nonstop since I saw that it was released on Apple Music. With any soundtrack, with any adaptation of source material that you love, there is a little element of adjustment, right? And I'm actually a fan of the Toto soundtrack from the old Lynch film, but this is a completely different universe from that. And what I found is I could almost feel Denis' interpretation of the story in the music. And I know that sounds a little out there, but Hans Zimmer is just a master, and the way he's using not only familiar instruments and music that evokes so much emotion. But there's this fascinating like vocal stuff going on in a lot of these tracks, even sounds and languages I'm not familiar with. So I just think the level of creativity is just through the ceiling on this stuff. And all these tracks are very different. It's a little bit different than something like a Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, where you kind of have an often recurring theme going on. It's there, but it's so diverse. All the tracks are so diverse. It just feels like Hans Zimmer himself was just diving headfirst into this new foreign world. And it's just fantastically recorded. The instruments are very unique. Some of them are very Middle Eastern. And I just think that is going to add so much to the experience of watching this film. And, you know, those of us here, we've seen the first 20 minutes, and again, it doesn't overshadow anything, but it adds so much to the emotion and the connection to what you're seeing on the screen. So I love that some of these reviews are saying this is some of Hans' best work ever. And so far, I don't disagree with them.
The Hans Zimmer soundtrack, amazing. I've had it on constant repeat as well. I'm pretty sure we all have. And we've got 2 more soundtracks to come as well, which is even more exciting. But yeah, as you said, you know, it's not a John Williams score, and I love John Williams score. You know, Empire Strikes Back is one of my all-time favorite soundtracks. But this is very distinct, very unique. You can't hum along to it necessarily. But I love the electronic bagpipes that come in as well, which we know that there's bagpipes in Dune. We've seen pictures of that in one of the trailers. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's just fantastic, and hopefully Oscar winning for Hans Zimmer.
Couldn't agree more. I think you guys have both said it really well. You know, I've been saying, I mean, Hans Zimmer has been one of the biggest, I think, talking points of this movie for a while, ever since he first said, you know, well, I was going to do Tenet. You know, I love working with Christopher Nolan, but then I heard about Dune. And Denis, I think, was it at the press conference, I think? He said it was Hans Zimmer was the first artist that he had talked to and got involved with Dune, because they were working on 2049, and he mentioned Dune was coming up as a, you know, a possibility. And you know, you can tell that he loves Dune, and you can tell that it goes back a long ways for him. And he has talked about it at length now in several interviews, just saying, you know, I've gone back to the source material. Denis and I have talked about it at such length. And yeah, he was just so greatly inspired. And I think that comes through in every single track on this. And it's I just can't believe that he wrote so much music and came up with so much music for this movie, that we are indeed getting 3 albums. And I'm just so excited. I mean, we're 2 weeks from yesterday, the premiere. 2 weeks from then is when we get the full actual film score to listen to. So not only is that really exciting because it's the full actual thing, and that will inform our, you know, expectations of the movie maybe a little bit more, but you know, it's so, you know, it's not a very long period of time at all, so that's something that for us to look forward to. It is, again, I was anticipating this to be a very experimental and different sound for him, and I mean, there are definitely parts, I mean, it has a Zimmer feel to it in some respects. I mean, it's certainly nothing like Inception or Interstellar really when it comes to the, you know, the sonic qualities of it, or like the production, but it's just so like daring and interesting. It's like it's almost like it doesn't sound like any film score I can really like think of. I mean, Blade Runner 2049 has some, he worked with Benjamin Wallfisk on that, and I think Wallfisk probably took the reins in a lot of ways just because, you know, Hans Zimmer is so busy all the time. But there are certain like electronic elements to that, and like the synths and things that they use that you can kind of get hints of it here. But I mean, this is like that on like acid, like it's or on spice, I guess, for the parts of this movie. But like, it's just it's not like a film score. Some people I've seen compare, like it does sound kind of like almost like a rock album, like a prog rock album to some extent. And the way that the tracks, like they just go on for like 10-15 minutes, and the album itself, there's only 9 tracks, but it's like an hour and a half long. It's just really exciting. I love it. I think the two that have stood out to me or maybe the three that really just pop into mind that I like listening to the most so far is the first track, the Song of the Sisters, I think is what it's called, which is super alien and like creepy. And, I would imagine it's supposed to be Bene Gesserit inspired to some extent. Super creepy. And then I think The Moon Over Caladan, that's another one where, I had mentioned this on Twitter, but it's like, I think it's like the most like outright like beautiful composition of the track, where it's just like, I mean, you can see it inspires a lot of imagery, and it's almost like a fairy tale-esque quality to it. And then Mind Killer, I think, is the one where it just is really like the kind of visceral, and it is alien in a lot of ways, but it's also like horrible, like in a great way. Like it's just kind of like this horror movie quality to it, which I really like admire. It's like you shouldn't want to listen to it because it's so like abrasive, but it really is like it's hypnotizing in a lot of ways. And my only hope, as much as I love this album, is that the score takes a lot from it and you hear a lot of it in there, and can be just as good, if not better than this, because this is obviously a high bar. I think we can agree.
Yeah, I mean, I've had it on playing in the background, and normally with the music in the background, it's there, and you don't really pay attention. And every so often, it's like, what in the world is happening in my speakers? It's like unlike anything I've heard before. It really captures your attention.
Unfortunately, like I said, I was at work yesterday, and I pretty much came home and tried getting some sleep because I know we were doing this earlier. So I haven't got a chance to listen to it. I do have it saved in my Spotify playlist, so I am going to listen to it. I also am happy that it's not the full score because I don't want to be spoiled. Like I've said in a previous episode, I feel like awesome filmmaking involves everything. And hearing the music for the first time in the theater while you're watching the film for the first time, I feel is part of the experience. So I still get goosebumps every time I hear that very Middle Eastern, vibe that we saw in the second trailer, even in little TV spots. And yes, I am a fan of the Toto soundtrack also. It's amazing. It holds a special place in my heart. My brother tells me all the time it's dated, it's campy, but you know what? It was the 80s. I love it. As a little boy in France, I was like, wow, super.
Guys, I don't know if this is right, but I have listened to this album a lot, and there's one track, and I don't know which one it is, where I actually hear a sequence of notes that sounds like something from the Toto soundtrack. Mark, I don't know if you know where that is, but every time I feel like there's that part in the Toto soundtrack that is in here.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer said he's never seen the Lynch film because he didn't want to be influenced. But yes, I can't remember which track it is, but I think it's right at the start, and it feels as if it's about to go into a Toto or Brian Eno track. I know exactly what you're talking about.
There's definitely, I think there's undeniably like an 80s feel to some of these tracks, and like just the music, like it's hard to describe. Like I would never dare try to describe it. I'm not like a musical expert by any means, but it does, like there are some that have like an 80s, it feels. And I have not seen the Lynch film. I have heard little bits and pieces of the music, but I can see what you guys are talking about.
Remember, I'm tone deaf, so my opinion might not count at all. Like my girlfriend gives me crap all the time that I can't sing. She's like, does music sound different since you can't sing and you're tone deaf to an average person? I'm like, I don't know. I like what I like. So I will listen to it before we do the next show.
And one of the influence, I'm not sure if that was an influence, but like thinking back to some of the, I don't even know how you would classify the genre, even as it's so broad, but like thinking of some of the albums like Enigma or Delirium. So those are some of the things that I've heard in the past, like basically where there are these alien sounding sounds, and you have the really powerful female vocals. So it did remind me of that to one aspect. And in the same way, like of those, had that feeling that you're taking this journey among all these different cultures in this vast universe. So that I definitely enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, what Johnny said about prog rock, I think, it's very much Pink Floyd, 15-minute tracks. You've got female vocals like Great Gig in the Sky. I think Pink Floyd is a bit of an influence on Hans Zimmer for this score, perhaps.
That was our show. That was Dune Talk for this week. It's really a lot to look forward to, as the movie is going to be hitting theaters in less than 2 weeks from now. So stay tuned for some more exciting movie news and hopefully more fan reviews as well coming up. So let's start with you, Mark. Thanks for joining us on this Saturday evening. Where can people find you?
Glad to be here again. Thanks for inviting me back. People can find me at DuneInfo on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and DuneInfo.com for the website.
Johnny?
Yeah, great to be, back on. I love doing these, and this is I think it's the most excited we've probably been in maybe the entire time, just because we know that things are looking good. And I gotta thank everyone for listening and watching too. I don't think I've done that yet, and I have gone on to YouTube and I've seen some of the comments, and they're really very kind, so I appreciate that. You can find me on Twitter, of course, as usual. Johnny Sobchak is my handle. Letterboxd as well, if you want to go check me out there. If you just look Johnny Sobchak up anywhere, it'll probably be one of the main people to pop up.
Garin?
You can find me on Twitter at Dune Companion and also at DuneCompanion.com. And thanks to everyone for joining us. We have such a fun time doing this, but it's even more fun to imagine that all of you are with us on this journey. So thanks.
Simon?
I just want to state for the record, I officially have a better beard than Oscar Isaac now. Thank you, everyone. Like, honestly, every time I look and I refresh YouTube and I see people watching it and commenting, it means a lot. Like, thank you to everyone that started following me on Instagram. You can do that at SDowdy. I got a couple of Dune fans that listen to the show or watch it, and they're just like, thank you for putting out the show. And we love doing this. We love Dune. We might not be as much as fans as Denis, but we also don't have the budget of Denis, or else, we would make this more elaborate for you guys. But thank you, honestly. And only a couple more weeks, and then a month and a half for the rest of us.
Yeah, totally. And this was Marcus Gabriel. You can find me at DuneNewsNet.com and Dune Newsnet on Twitter and Instagram. So thank you all for joining, and look forward to talking to you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.